we still have 2 games going on. In the game of Keymer and Dubov, we have Rook and the bishop versus Rook.
So,
and we can count the moves. We can count the moves, so we can try to expect when it end in a draw.
So move 45, Rook takes e4 check. That was the last capture. So we have until move 95. And we're on move 65. So we still have 30 moves to go. And I'm just going to fast forward through this game a bit because this is the ideal setup of how to hold a draw in this position. You want your king 2 squares away from the rook like this. And the king is going to be forced back eventually because the rook came around here. And after rook a6 check, the king goes to 7th rank. And the rook now behind the bishop. This is important because rook a7 check, king d8. You don't want to go king c8 because after king c8, you're going to see the evaluation where there it goes. Because king c6, I give you my bishop. Have my bishop because this is a back rank checkmate. And now you lose the game because you try to run away. Here comes the bishop to c5. The king says, I don't want to be checkmated because I can't draw arrows. Here we go. Because I don't have any escape squares, I'm going to try king e8 to get to f7. And then you play the move rook e7 check. The king can't go to f8 because it walks into a discovered check where I bring my rook, say, to e2 and win your rook because you're in check. So you have to go back to d8. And after this, this is where people start making mistakes. They bring the rook back or along the 7th rank. You bring your rook here to a square like e3, I'm pretty sure, because you're trying to give this check to force the king to c8, and then you have the mate back here. So let's say rook d1, check, king c8, rook e8, there we go. I moved your king away. So the last opportunity is to try to make a move that pins the bishop, exactly, and you're running out of moves as black. So I can even make the move rook e1, because you need to stay with your rook behind the bishop. You make the move, say, rook c3 here. I make the move rook f1, and now you don't have the e3 square to block the checkmate. So that's what's important, because otherwise, if I started with this move, you go rook back to e2, and now you can stop the checkmate. When I check you, you block. If I check you here, your king runs away. So it's important to drag this rook up to a square, here, to drag the rook to a square where it can't give you the checks. If you go rook c4 to meet rook f1 with rook e4, then I go rook, I think I go rook d1 check now, because if you go king e8, now I go rook f1. There's no blocking the mate. I know we're getting really deep into the weeds, but this is like—
I love it. I love it. No one explained to me this. It's so hard to learn, I'm sure. There are hundreds of people watching right now and appreciate this. We're focused.
Yeah, it's like one of these endgame lessons that you like know that it's winning in some occasions, but you don't really know when. But the point is you want to deliver this back rank checkmate, and you're dragging the rook away from being able to stop that checkmate. Like if you make the move too soon with rook to coming to f3, as mentioned, the rook can slide back to the defense down along the e file. So you're bringing the rook to a square where it can no longer defend the king. And here there's no rook e3 because I take it, and that means I'm going to back rank checkmate you. And if rook c4 instead, then I throw in this check. The king can't go to e8 because the mate, as shown, the king goes here. And now I play the move rook f1. And importantly, you can't block the check. You have no rook d4. So I'm using my bishop, which shields my king, to take away your rook's path to helping save the king. There's no rook d4, but if the rook were on c3, you'd have rook d3 to block. So that's why if the rook were on c3, just to show you again, now instead of going rook check, which allows you to block here on d8, I'm instead going to immediately make the move rook f1 because you can't block along the e file. So I know it's a bit complicated. There's so many nuances here in these endgames, but the major point is you want to use your king in an advanced position to try to checkmate the enemy king, use your bishop to block checks, and also use your bishop to take away squares that the enemy rook can go to so you can deliver that checkmate and they can't block it.
Wow, that's brilliant. So you need to remember these two ways. Either the rook gets at the spot where your bishop controls, or you can give a check first and then get at the position where the opponent cannot guard the checkmate. Wow, we need your bank account to send the money for this lesson. All of us.
Oh, well, you know, it's the game should be a draw, but this is how you can go wrong. And it's not like black in the lines we're looking at did anything that was too wrong. Right? And after this check, I showed you why king c8 wasn't good, and that's because the king can run up. But that's why Dubov went king d8. The king cannot run up. You lose this bishop with check. So the king went to c5. Now the king ran away to e8. And this technique of coming back to 7th rank, when you allow me to, it's going to hold the balance. And we're going to continue seeing an attempt by Vincent here. But look at this, rook d7. I'm not going to allow you to cut my king. And now I have king up to c7, keeping the king and rook nice and close. That's what where they want to be. And this position, the king has run away. So as soon as the king runs outside and doesn't get boxed in on the back rank or on the edge of the board, like you want to stay away from the edges. If you're this black king, then you feel a lot more comfortable about the position.
Yeah, nice. And another moves can like pass when the king is out, and you're getting closer to 50 moves where you can, you know, stop the clock and claim for a draw.
And I think another thing that can be confusing, Ketty, is that we were just in this position a few moves back, right around here. So we see this position and we see it from the perspective of the ranks, that the king is on the last rank coming up to the 7th rank. And you also need to flip this and see it on the files. So when this king comes up to b5, it's still a similar dynamic as when it's on the rank. This rook can come to b7 and help defend the king. So after king d3, white's trying to force the king to the edge of the board, but it's just the same thing in a different space. It doesn't come as naturally, I think, because usually our king is on the first rank or the back rank rather than up on b5. So I think people need to sometimes remember that it is a very similar dynamic, just with the king being more advanced.
Yeah, that's a good point. Sometimes it's easier to find when the king is on the back rank and not on the sides. Oh, that was very instructive.
And now I hope, and there it is, rook b7 played. Now I hope to never have to explain rook and bishop versus rook endgames again.
Yes. And look at the time of Dubov. He definitely knows what he's doing. He's playing really fast. And yeah, that's so nice. My coach used to tell me that before the very important tournament, it's very good to just to repeat and remember this kind of theoretical end games, because it can happen. It's good to be ready for it.
Yep.
It was nice words. Never went to practice, but it was really nice words. And I agree with him.